Hello, everyone. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce you to the session 10 Things You Didn't Know About Our World in Data with Pablo Rosado. I'm Rin, and I'll be your MC for the session. Coming up, we'll have a 20-minute talk from Pablo. We'll then move straight into a live Q&A where you can post your questions directly. And feel free to also submit those questions anytime through Flipkart. After about 30 minutes of Q&A, we'll bring the session to a close. If you have any other questions for Pablo or the Our World in Data team, there will be an office hours immediately after the session where you can join. And so now, let me introduce you our speaker for the day. Pablo Rosado is the principal data scientist at Our World in Data. He has worked across different companies in the private and public sector and NGOs, and prior to that, was a physics researcher. He has a PhD in gravitational wave astrophysics and also loves science communication, including running his own YouTube channel about science and effective altruism. And without further ado, please join me in welcoming Pablo.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Wayne. Hi everyone. My name is Pablo Rosado, and I'm really excited to talk to you about 10 things you may not know about using Our World in Data. Our World in Data, or OWID, is a website with a very important mission: to make the world a better place with open data and research. Even before I started working there, I have always found it a fantastic resource to understand and to find data and visualizations on some of the most important topics. It has helped me adjust my worldview on many different topics, and it's my go-to place to find evidence-based arguments to discuss those topics. But it has also helped many others around the world. Last year, OWID had close to 100 million visitors, including school students, individuals like me trying to better understand the world, journalists, researchers, and policymakers. And now, after having worked there for almost 3 years, I'm going to give you a short tour of what it has to offer to help you extract as much value from it as possible. So by the end of this talk, you will know some tips and tricks, including some brand new features. And after explaining how OWID can help you, I will also mention how you can help OWID. And if I express any views and opinions, they are my own. Let's start with the first of those 10 things. The first section will be a little longer and a little more dense. I'll explain the kinds of content that you can find at OWID and how our content is structured. So when you visit our website, you can find topic pages, articles, charts, data explorers, data pages, data insights. And apart from all that, there are some other types of content like the SDG tracker and some teaching material. So that's a lot of things, and it may feel a bit overwhelming. So now I'm going to quickly show you what each of these things are and how they look like. First, let's talk about topic pages. A topic page is a comprehensive web page dedicated to a specific topic, which includes charts, articles, and data explorers. Say that you're interested in a topic, in the topic of energy. So then this topic page that I'm showing here is exactly the right place for you. In this page, there are different sections, and you can jump from one to another using the bar on top. And the first section is a short introduction to the topic. The second is a data explorer. This is an interactive tool that will let you play around with different options to explore different indicators, metrics, countries, and times. Then in the topic page, you'll also find a section on research and writing. And here you'll see all OWID articles related to that topic. Then the next section is all about charts. This is a block where you can scroll through all charts on our site that are related to the topic of energy. You can interact with those charts from here, or if you click on the title of any of those charts, you will go to a dedicated page to that chart. The next section is devoted to how to cite this work. And here you'll see the recommended way to cite a topic page if you want to use it in your own articles or on social media. And finally, there is a section about how to reuse this work. This section specifies the license of the content, and how it can be shared or reused. And that's all for topic pages. Now let's look at an article. An article at OWID looks like this. It is a focused piece of content that delves into a specific issue. While a topic page gives an overview of a broader subject, an article is often shorter and more targeted to a certain aspect of a larger topic. And within an article, you will find often charts. And a chart is a visual representation of data. Most of OWID charts are interactive. Under the hood, the data visualization tool used to create charts is called a Grapha, which is the core tool developed, maintained, and used by OWID. And I'll give you some tips on how to use it later. But for now, I will just say that there are different types of charts. For example, this one is a map chart, but there's also line charts, or scatter charts, or stacked area charts, bar charts, stacked bar charts, slope charts, Marimekko charts. And then we also have static charts. These are not interactive and are usually a more customized representation of the data. And where do you usually see these charts? In the past, a chart used to be in a page like this. Underneath the chart, you would see a lot of links to other related articles and charts. And we still have charts pages like this today. However, charts are now slowly moving towards a new kind of page. They're called data pages, and they look like this. In a data page, you see a chart for a specific piece of data, but you also find everything you need to put that data into context. So here you can find all articles and topic pages where this data is used, all charts where this data appears, all details about the sources and the processing of this data, and how to reuse it. And this is very important because we want to ensure that anyone who uses OWID data not only cites OWID, but also the original data provider. In a way, the structure is similar to that of topic pages, but data pages are constructed around one specific piece of data rather than a topic. But sometimes you don't want to have all the depth and breadth around a piece of data. Maybe you just want to have a little bite into a topic. And that's what data insights are. Bite-sized insights on how the world is changing, published every weekday. They contain just a visualization, short text, and links in case you want to explore a bit more. And with all the previews, we have covered pretty much all types of content that you can find at OWID. Apart from this, we just have a few other special things. One is the SDG tracker, which is a page that tracks the progress made in each of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals adopted by the United Nations in 2015. And finally, there is also a teaching hub where you can find information on how to use OWID content in teaching. And now that you know all the types of content that you can find on our website, let's move on. Let's quickly see how you can interact with OWID's website. This is OWID's homepage, and you see straight away that it has a lot to offer. If you have time and simply want to explore and discover, here you can find direct links to popular topic pages, an explanation of OWID's mission, some articles, some data insights, some charts and explorers, among other things. If you want to browse through our complete list of topics, you can click here. And there you can navigate through all topics and subtopics covered at OWID. But imagine that you come to OWID searching for a specific piece of content. Then you can use the search bar. And as a tip, when you are at the homepage, you can hit the /, and that will take the cursor to the search bar. That way you can start typing straight away. So now say that you are looking for a specific article about nitrous oxide emissions, and you are on the search bar and you start typing nitrous, and you see the top results. Here on the right, you can see the type of content that is suggested, either an article or a topic page or a chart or an explorer. And if you want to have a more detailed search through our content, you can click on the link at the bottom of the top results, and that will bring you to the content search page, which looks like this. Here you can have a preview of articles, charts, and explorers that match what you typed on the search bar. But now let's be even more specific. Maybe you're a researcher looking for a very specific indicator related to greenhouse gas emissions. How can you find such specific piece of data at OWID? Data is at the heart of OWID, and over the years we have tried different ways to share data with the public. And one of the old ways to get data is by accessing our dedicated GitHub repositories for important topics, namely emissions, energy, COVID-19, and poverty. Each one of those repositories have their own documentation explaining what each of the available indicators mean and what their original sources are. But this is very limited to just a few important topics, and maybe you need something else. Well, for the ones among you who are familiar with Python programming, we also have a Pythonic API called OWID Catalog. Any piece of data that you see in a chart can be accessed this way. You can install it with pip install OWID Catalog, and you can import the catalog and search for any data set in our entire catalog. What it returns is a very special kind of data frame, which we call a table. It's a table, and it actually contains not only the data, but also the metadata. So if you select a column in that table, you can access the values, but also its units, a short description, the sources of the data, a description of how it was processed, etc. And if you do any operations between columns and create new indicators, all that metadata and the information of the original sources is automatically propagated. And that's how we can keep track of all the original sources that created the data in our charts. But don't worry, if you are not a nerd like me and you'd like to have an easier, more visual way to search for data, there is an alternative. We now have a much more user-friendly data catalog. To access it, you can click on Resources, then on Data Catalog, and there you are. This is our brand new data catalog. You're one of the first people in the world to see it. So this is a powerful catalog that lets you do very specific searches. For example, you can search for per capita nitrous oxide emissions from agriculture in China and the United States. And it will show you exactly that chart with those countries selected. So great, now you have found the data that you were looking for, but now how can you download it? So let's look into the different ways for you to download OWID data. Again, one option is, for the ones familiar with Python, to use the OWID catalog. With this, you can search for specific datasets in our catalog and download them as tables. But if you want to, if what you want is the data of a specific chart that you're interested in, you can also easily get that data. Simply copy the URL of the chart and pass it to the charts.getData function, and you will get that data. But again, there is an easier, much more user-friendly alternative. Since last week, we have a brand new way to download data. At the bottom of the chart, click on the download button. And there you have the data tab, where you now have various options for download. You can click to download a compressed zip file and with all the data in the chart. You can also download a zip file with only the selected data. So for example, if you have selected a specific country in the chart, you will get only that data for that country. The zip file contains the data, the metadata, and a README file with all the explanations. But that's not all. If you scroll down, you'll also see that that you have a download URL. In a nutshell, any link to a chart followed by .zip will let you download the zip file with all the data and metadata. And any link to a chart followed by .csv will let you download just the data. So you can add more parameters to the link if you want to download only the data for specific countries or years. This is very helpful if you want to download our data programmatically as part of your data pipeline. But now that we are looking at the chart, let's see what else you can do. How can you interact with OWID charts? This is again an interactive grapher chart, and I'm not going to explain all things that you can do with a chart, but just a few things that you may have missed. So on the top, we have the type of chart view, usually a table, a map, or a chart. Right now, we are on the map view of a chart about electricity generation from renewables. When you hover over a country, you can already see the value of electricity generated in the latest year and a line showing its evolution over time. If you want to see that line in more detail, you can either click on the specific country or click above on the chart view button. By default, each chart shows a list of countries. These countries are sometimes chosen because of their relevance to the data, but often they're just randomly chosen. On the right, you can see all available countries and regions. And on the top of that list, you will see the country where you currently are, and possibly the continent or some other relevant region. In my case, I'm in Spain, I'm in the EU, in Europe, I'm also in the world. So yeah, you can choose your own country there, but you can also sort that list of countries by name, by GDP, or by the actual data that you're looking at using the Sort By menu. And we also have a settings button that usually gives you a few other additional customization capabilities, like changing from linear to log scale, or visualizing all countries together versus each one on a separate graph. Finally, the Learn More About This Data clickable link. This will take you to the part of the data page where all the details about the data, its sources, and processing are explained. Another secret tip, if you press S on any chart, it will show you all that information. Here you can see all the relevant metadata about this indicator. There are some interesting ways to interact with the timeline. You can move the limits to show a specific range of years, for example, 10 years. But you can also bring the minimum and maximum year selector to the same point, and you will see that the line chart becomes a bar chart. And if you want to go back to the line chart, simply click anywhere to open the range of years again. One more tip I wanted to share with you is about scatter charts. Here we see per capita emissions versus fossil fuel consumption per capita. If you press play, you can see how each country has evolved over time. We see that as each average person increased their energy consumption from fossil fuels, per capita emissions also grew. But we can also visualize this evolution in a different way. If we open the selection of years and press play again, we see the trace of each country with their ups and downs. And this can be a little bit messy. So one thing you can do is select a specific country, for example, Bangladesh. And this way you can see that country's evolution in all detail. But maybe you just want to see the beginning and the end of the end point to see the overall evolution over the years. To do that, you click here on this arrow, and it will change from showing the full trace or just the beginning and end of the curve. That way you can also see the relative change of a country with respect to a certain starting year. And if you see that the color of the arrow changed, that's because Bangladesh classification changed from low income to lower middle income country in 2014. So now, speaking about income groups, let's move on to a seemingly trivial issue that is actually one of OWID's biggest headaches. How do we define regions and income groups? Regions are one of those things that we are more frequently asked about. So first of all, what does North America or South America mean? There are different definitions of regions, and different data providers have their own definitions. For that reason, we have a page dedicated to how our regions are defined. It also shows region definitions from other important data providers, like the World Bank, the World Health Organization, or the United Nations. But what does Russia mean when we go back in time? An important thing to keep in mind is that we define countries and regions as the geographical place that they occupy today. So, for example, Russia corresponds to the geographical region that is called Russia today, even if we go back in time prior to the dissolution of the Soviet Union. The same applies to income groups. So high-income countries usually means the countries that are classified as high-income countries today. And this is at least the criterion that we follow most of the time, but not always. Firstly, some charts are designed explicitly to show the evolution of income groups. Those charts obviously do not fulfill this criterion. But secondly, sometimes the characteristics of the data are not compatible with that criterion. And I know that this can cause confusion, but it is a complicated issue, and we have hundreds of thousands of indicators to take care of. So it's hard to follow very strict criteria that fits all our data. Speaking of which, you may be wondering, how do you manage to keep hundreds of thousands of indicators up to date? Over the years, we have developed our own ecosystem of custom tools and workflows to be able to keep track of what data needs to be updated and to easily add data add data with all the descriptions and the context that it needs. If you are interested, you can also visit our technical documentation. And another important contribution of OWID is to ensure that the data is clean and reliable. And data is complicated. Methodologies change over time. People make mistakes. And in general, you can find all sort of weird things in big data sets. And that's why we have many sanity checks and have also developed tools to detect possible anomalies. And we often are in contact with data providers to inform them about potential issues. So we are getting close to the end of the presentation, and I have shown a few tips and tricks on how to use OWID efficiently, but now I'm going to give you an additional productivity hack that I find particularly useful. You may use your browser bar as a search engine, for example, to search on Google, but you can also use it to search for OWID content. I have it set up that way, and it's really useful. Every time I am in the middle of a conversation and want to quickly find very specific data, what I usually do is the following. I open a new tab, Command-T, I type OWID and press Tab, and then I type whatever I want to search. For example, life expectancy in Japan, and hit Enter. So do you want to know how to set this up? You can easily do it right now. I'll tell you the instructions, assuming Chrome on a Mac, but of course you can also achieve the same thing on other systems. So if you enter the Chrome settings on the three dots on the upper right corner of the window, on the left, you can click on Search Engine and then select Manage Search Engines and Site Search. You scroll down, and on the right of Site Search, you click on Add, and there you type the name, our World in Data, the shortcut, OWID, and the URL, which is a bit complicated. I put it there on the slides. It's ourworldindata.org/search?Q=%S. If you didn't have time to follow these instructions, don't worry. You can come back to the presentation later, or you can ask me later in the Q&A. But yeah, this is something that I find particularly useful. So if you like OWID content and want to ensure that you're always up to date, what can you do? You can join the daily Data Insight newsletter, and you can also join the bi-weekly Digest newsletter. To join these newsletters, just go to our homepage, and on the bottom right there, you see a subscribe button. But you can also follow us on any or all of the usual social media: Instagram, Threads, X, Blue Sky, LinkedIn, or Facebook. And you can become one of the very first followers of OWID in Spanish. This is a brand new account that we just opened this week, our _ES. And yeah, so now that we reached the end of the presentation, I hope I have managed to make OWID as helpful as possible for you. And now you may be wondering, what can you do to help OWID? So one thing you can easily do is to follow us on social media. Interacting with the content and sharing it helps OWID reach more people. And you can also give us feedback. For example, if you see a typo or something wrong in a chart or an article, to do that, please do not send us an email. It's much easier for us to organize and track feedback if you use the dedicated feedback form. And if you use it, please be as specific as possible. If you're comfortable with code, you can also report bugs. If you find a bug on the code, please write an issue. And if you want to fix it yourself and it's trivial, feel free to create a pull request. And if you want to make a substantial contribution, please have a look at the documentation first, then write an issue to explain your plan, and wait for our input before starting to code. And yeah, finally, another way you can support OWID is, of course, making a donation. So yeah, I hope that was helpful for you, and thank you very much for your time.
Muchas gracias, Pablo. Thank you so much for the insightful talk. I can see we have several questions already waiting. So let's jump into the first one. Harrison asked, are there specific gaps in OWID's coverage where you are currently focusing on finding more data?
Yeah, so are there specific topics that we want to cover more? Definitely. We have also a dedicated page to explain how that process happens, like how topics are chosen or why some topics are there and some others are not. It's not just a matter of this is important, let's just put it out there. Sometimes there are many constraints, like whether there is data, we usually use data at the country level or at the year level. And sometimes we just find data for a specific city or data that is unlikely to be updated soon. So there are several constraints, and that makes it complicated to cover topics that we really want to cover. But yeah, there are some topics that are definitely gonna come up soon. There are many, and of course we have a limited team, so these things may take a little bit longer, but there are definitely some topics that need to be covered more fully, and maybe some low-hanging fruits are out there. If anyone has some suggestions, like, hey, there is this new amazing data set, and I think it should totally be an OWID and have some charts on it, just please give us feedback, and that would be really useful.
Nice. That sounds like a big area for volunteers. The next question is also from Harrison. How does OWID measure the impacts of its data visualizations on policy making or public understanding? That's a very big question.
Yeah, that's a hard topic, and I think I'm probably not the right person at OWID to talk about this. You would need to talk with other people in the team. I'm more dedicated to the data work, specifically in some topics. So I can give you my answer, but it's probably not going to be accurate enough. So I would prefer to not put OWID in I don't want to respond as OWID. We have thought about this, like especially some people in the team are thinking very, very carefully about this, because obviously it's a very important part of the mission. We want to have an impact, and there are some interventions in the world that are very impactful, and progress is easy to measure. OWID is not particularly easy to measure. Like the impact of OWID is not particularly easy to measure because, right? Yeah, as you said, we put some charts out there, and there is people looking at these charts. Some people that have decision power, policymakers and journalists and people that are doing research on important topics. How can we know if or how much these charts and visualizations, these articles help them to take those decisions and have an impact that way? It's really hard to measure, but we are having we have a team on analytics internally, and we're developing more and more ways to visualize how many visitors we have on different topics, why this is happening, what topics may be a little bit less covered or less visited by others. So we do have internal tooling to try to measure this in one way or another.
Thank you. Hiram asked, how does OWIT decide what data sets to use?
Yeah, I think this is related to what I was saying before. There, we have a page where you can see all the explanations. It's a combination of different factors. Very often, we find data sets that are very important, but maybe there are legal reasons why we are not allowed to use them. For example, like we try to not use proprietary data. In the end, we want to have everything that we show should be transparent. We don't want to just say, oh, trust us on this. This is the truth. That's it. No, we want to show some data. And if you have some reservations about it, you can always go to the original data and check what's going on, see all the full methodology and documentation. So sometimes we're just not allowed to use certain data, or there are complications that make it like just better to not have it. And that's unfortunate. I wish all data was on important topics at least was public and available to everyone, but that's sometimes not the case, unfortunately. But also, yeah, as I said before, there are many other considerations like the granularity of the data, how often the data is updated, or sometimes data can have some methodological elements that we are not sure about, and maybe it's a bit controversial. Like there are some things that can make it a bit complicated, and maybe we decide to deprioritize a data set with respect to others where things are maybe more transparent or more straightforward and similarly important. So there are many considerations. Yeah, it's not trivial to select which data should be there and which one should not. But again, if you see some low-hanging fruits out there, please let us know.
Thank you. Axel asked, based on your experience, what are the main factors that increase the chances of a data visualization going viral?
Going viral. That's hard, and I think that relies a lot on the algorithms of social media, which is like not something we can control. Like I think most of our audience is in the US, for example. So topics where that are more closely related to the audience maybe is more easily to go viral. That doesn't mean necessarily that it's the most impactful or anything, but it's just social media being that way. And if people from the US see this particular piece of like a data insight, for example, about something about the US, then they're more likely to share it. That's, again, not necessarily meaning that it's more important, but it's just, people click on it more and the algorithms benefit from it. But yeah, I think overall, while grapher charts are interactive and very useful and can give you a lot of different customization opportunities, I think static charts usually go better on social media, and they spread more because they're much more like customized. That they show one specific thing, and there are like annotations around, and they're like or more colors, and everything is designed to a much more much better degree of granularity, or is more visually appealing. So those static charts are usually spread around more easily.
Thank you. The next question is from Luis. Is there an easy way to get information on the data quality and quantity the numbers represented in the graphs are based on, especially for being informed if there is much uncertainty in the data?
That's a great question. And I wish that we could access uncertainties on each indicator that we get from a data provider. Almost always, we don't have that. We do have some proxies for the uncertainty of an indicator. For example, we update data every month or every year or whatever, and we can see how some indicators for some countries have much more variance. Like some of them are much more like static, like they just add a new data point for 2023, for 2024, and that's it. And for other indicators, we see how all of a sudden all the previous data just jumps like massively. And it's like, wow, why did that happen? And we have no information about that. And of course, like many of the indicators that we're showing are very nuanced, and the methodology maybe relies on some assumptions that are very uncertain, and we don't have very often we just don't have access to all that information. We also, just as a technical limitation, it's hard to express uncertainties in charts because it just makes things much more complicated. And given that in most cases we just don't have that information, we haven't put all the effort in trying to add error bars to our measurement. However, what I can say is that any piece of data, as I was saying before, at least any indicator that you see, we keep all the metadata for it. Like if you download this data, you will see where it comes from. Like if, for example, we have emissions from, say, the global carbon budget, and then we have population from the UN World Population Prospects. And now we want to calculate per capita emissions. So we just divide one by the other. We have this system that lets us track both sources. So everything that you see will have, if it's emissions per capita, you will see both the global carbon budget and the UN WPP. So all this information is tracked automatically, and you can always, for each piece of data in our website, you can trace back the origin and then find more information from the original data provider.
Wow, that's amazing to know. Gabriel asks, is OWIT in collaboration or in competition with Gapminder? Are there also other similar tools and websites that maybe cover different areas and can be seen as complementary to OWIT?
We all love Gapminder, and I think the work of the Roslings has been an inspiration for OWIT and many other people in the world. I think there should be more Gapminders out there and more OWITs. It's just that there are not that many. If you want to consider that competition, okay, but I don't think, I mean, there is room for both, and it's not necessarily doing the exact same thing. I really like Gapminder, and I go there. I like their quizzes and these questions about the world that you are probably wrong about. I think that's just fantastic. So I don't think that that's a competition. There are other websites out there that I don't even want to mention necessarily that let you visit data without showing the data provider, and you have to log in or pay to be able to see where the data comes from. I think that's not a very good service. So I think all these alternative platforms to OWIT should also be more transparent and ensure maybe it's not possible to share all the data, but at the very least, being clear about what the data means and where it comes from. I think that should be just like level one. I think that should be the threshold, right? Like anything below that is not acceptable. So I don't think there is many competitors for OWIT, and I think Gapminder is just a cooperator rather than a competitor. I think both websites are very useful.
Thank you so much. Related to challenges facing organizations like OWIT or Gapminder, from your perspective, what are the biggest opportunities or challenges facing those organizations in their efforts to democratize data and improve global understandings of the world pressing issues?
Yeah, again, I can reply from the part that I work on. Like, of course, if you talk to other people in the team that are more involved with donations or more like communications or other topics, then they will give you a totally different answer. From my perspective, some of the big challenges are the lack of standardization of data, the lack of maybe data literacy. Like you see, and you can see that especially it happened during COVID, that there was a lot of very important data out there and people needed to have access to that data. And everything was in a totally different format with different units in a very poor format, impossible to grab programmatically, or even for a person to access that data was complicated. And sometimes people in organizations want to sort of overcorrect for this problem, and they create really fancy dashboards with a lot of buttons and colorful things happening all over the screen. And in the end, they don't provide a very simple CSV file with the data so that you can just have a look at the values. So I think overall, that's, at least for me, from the data perspective, that's one of the main challenges, that very often we see, oh, this is really important, let's try to grab that piece of data. And then it takes us a very long time just to understand how to access the data, what each indicator means, whether or not we are allowed to use that data, what is the license for it, like, or how to cite that data is unclear. So all these things are challenges for us from the data perspective. I'm sure there are many others, but I'm just replying from my own perspective and experience.
Yeah, thank you for the question, for the answer. That's definitely a problem that everyone, including the general public, have to deal with right now. And another question on the classification of data. How does OWIT handle classifying data in contested regions like Kashmir? For example, would be whether vaccination data goes in the Pakistan or India bucket?
I don't know. I don't know if, like, I certainly cannot reply at for that specific example, but more generally, if the question is about how we handle problems that are like touched several regions, like that's, I guess, one of them, like what happens with or energy, for example. You can also or emissions, for example. We have this problem that when we talk about emissions, what are you talking about? Where emissions were generated, or the emissions that are based on the consumption of the people in that country, right? That may come from commodities that were produced in a different country. Like, there are problems like this, but we usually try to clarify that in the metadata. In the end, there is no perfect answer to any of these things, or even quantifying these issues may be impossible. But I think the most important thing is that whatever criterion we use, it should be clear in the description. And if it's not in some particular case, just send us feedback and we'll try to clarify that. Again, as I was mentioning before, defining regions and like, especially over time, things happen, and it's really tricky when you go back in time, decades or even centuries, in some of our indicators, and the world was very different. You know, the configuration, the separation between countries has changed a lot. So it's really hard to decide, you know, what is, as I said, what is Russia? What was Russia 30 years ago? Like, all these things are just really tricky to handle.
Yes, then it all boils down to where the data come from and being transparent about it, right?
Yeah.
The next question is more about the organization, about OWIT itself. Gabrielle asked, what is your business model and what are your main economic revenues?
Well, again, that is not my part of, like, that's not what I work on. Like, you would need to ask someone who is involved in these sort of things. Clearly, we have like, everything we do is based on donations. So talking about a business model, maybe it's complicated. Like, we are providing a service that and a product that clearly many people, millions of people, find useful. And the way that these people are paying back is with donations, and people want us to keep doing this work and expanding our content. So that's the way it works. I know that other data republishers work in different ways. Like, they sort of hint at, hey, look at this amazing data we have. If you want to have it, you pay. And as I said before, I think this is just wrong, especially for the topics that we covered. Like, if it's something, you know, more of a, you know, insights on the market on a particular product that you want to maybe develop as a startup. Of course, I understand that there are some companies that want to benefit that way, and that's their business model. But when we talk about vaccinations or about CO2 emissions and things like that. Why would anyone need to pay to access that very important life-saving information? It should be just public. So, and that's how OWIT works.
Thank you. The next question is from Mel. She asks, will the OWIT website ever become available in languages other than English?
We have had a lot of discussions about that, and me as a Spanish speaker who shares the content with their family members, and very often it's like, oh, is that in Spanish? Oh, sorry, it's not. It is annoying, and I think there is a lot of there's a big demographic that we are not reaching because of this. But it's also true that it adds a lot of maintenance. Keep in mind that everything or almost everything that we publish needs to be regularly updated. Like, we don't usually publish one thing and forget about it, like many journals do. Many journals, online outlets, they just publish a thing, and after a few years, it's old news. Whatever, it's up to you if you want to read it or not. But we try to keep everything up to date. All the charts, all the data gets regularly updated, and we want to do, to do the same thing for every written piece, every topic page, every article. And if we had to do it for different languages, it just adds a lot of additional work. So that's the main blocker. But for example, we just started this Instagram account in Spanish, so that's at least something. Doesn't mean that we are going to end up having the website in different languages. Hopefully soon there will be some tool that lets us handle that very easily and have full control of the translations. For the moment, we haven't found that, unfortunately. But let's see what happens.
Thank you. I think we only have about 2 minutes, so let's have one or two more questions. Yuri asked, what are the main sources of the presented data? Is it from national government reports, international institutions report, meta-analyses, or original studies?
What are the main sources? There is all of those and more. Like, just scroll through any of the charts or just go to the website, explore anything. You will see that we have a lot of data from big institutions like the World Bank or the UN or different institutions of the UN. But yeah, we also have every now and then some papers that published some file with the paper, and we also get that because it's very important. And yeah, we have just a big variety of different data providers. Try to keep it short, given that we have 1 minute left. You wanted to have another question?
Yes. For now, we don't have any other questions. But so I think we can end the session now. Wonderful. That
Excellent.
concludes the Q&A for our session today. If you have any other questions for Pablo or OWIT, please join the office hours immediately after the session on Zoom. Thank you all for attending, and have a great rest of your conference.
Thank you very much, everyone, for your time.